From the Toronto Star, I'm Reggie Mudler, and this matters. The cat and mouse game between cops and robbers continues as this pandemic rages on. When the pandemic first hit, there were reports that crime rates around the world had fallen. But as time has gone by, criminals are looking for new opportunities to take advantage of these uncertain times. Last week, Interpol warned that the vaccine could be a target. And now, Pfizer and Biontech already have reported that hackers had gained access to documents related to their vaccine in a cyber attack on the European Medicines Agency just this past Wednesday. But we don't need to go very far to find cyber crimes occurring, as the province of Ontario is also dealing with one right now. Today, we have two perspectives on COVID-related crime. The Star's Peter Edwards joins us to talk about how organized crime is capitalizing on this. But first, Robert Benzie, the Star's Queen's Park Bureau Chief, joins us to detail an investigation he's been following. Rob, thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure, Raju.
So Rob, we're talking about COVID crime today, and one of the big ones is fraud. Right now, $11 million has gone missing from where?
This is a pandemic relief fund that Premier Doug Ford's government in Ontario launched in April. It was a $378 million fund called the Support for Families Fund that was money designed to help kids 12 and under or parents of special needs kids 21 and under with payments to go toward education, things that they would need, whether they had to buy apps or technology because their kids were at home learning. So for most families, it was $200 payment per child. And for families with special needs children and youth, it was $250 per child. And a lot of the money flowed out very, very quickly. And then there was some suspicious banking activity noticed by the Bank of Montreal and the TD Bank related to payments. And it has emerged that the government alleges in court documents filed with the Ontario Superior Court that $11 million has been stolen from this fund, most of it in the form of the $250 payments that were supposed to go to special needs families.
Okay, let's just talk about how awful it is, where these people potentially are taking this money from. I just want to have that out there for special needs kids, like in a pandemic too, right?
Yeah. Families that are already having challenges. And then you have this pandemic that has everyone sitting in their homes like you and I are today. And a little bit of relief that the government wanted to get out the door quickly. And allegedly, some of it has been stolen. And I think there's a lot of anger about this. I mean, this story, when we broke the story a couple of weeks ago, it was one of the most read that we've had all year at the Star. And I think it's because it resonated with people, the sense of injustice, the sense of unfairness, and the sense that everyone is struggling and having to cope in this pandemic. And I think this little help that the government tried to give, to see it allegedly misused like that, I think is problematic for a lot of people.
Let us be very, very clear. You are working mostly off of court documents. The Ontario government is alleging that a family of computer consultants is somehow involved with this. What can you tell us about this at this point?
Well, two of these people have been fired from the government, from senior level IT jobs that they had in the government. Sanjay Madan is a veteran computer person from the Ontario government. He was the $176,000 a year director of the Ministry of Education's iAccess Solutions branch. And they were responsible, that branch was responsible for overseeing the website application that was used to apply for the funds. So Mr. Madan has won some awards over the years for his work with the Ontario government. He's been around for a long time and been involved in a lot of projects. And even though he has been terminated with cause, he has not been charged, although the Ontario Provincial Police's anti-rackets branch has 7 detectives working full-time on this case. We'll see what happens in the new year. Through his lawyer, Mr. Madan has not commented. I've dealt with his civil lawyer and his criminal attorney, and he has not commented. But his assets have been frozen. And among those assets, Raju, is 6 condominiums and 1 7-bedroom home in North York, and $1 million in proceeds from another home that Mr. Madan sold in September. Also fired was his wife, Shalini Madan, who was also a computer specialist at the government in a different ministry. She was at the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services, and she was making $130,000 a year. So between them, they were senior folks and involved at Queen's Park for a long time. Their 2 sons were also working for a time at Queen's Park. Neither of them are now. Their elder son, Chinmaya, is now working for Microsoft in Seattle, but he was working with his mother in her branch in the government until August. And then their younger son, Ujjal, he was working at his father's Ministry of Education, as a contract employee. And he's now a master's student at the Georgia Institute of Technology. According to the court documents, another associate of Sanjay Madan's, a chap called Vedan Singh, who lives in Richmond Hill, he was also allegedly involved in this because he allegedly received $42,500 in these payments to 30 Bank of Montreal accounts that were opened allegedly under his name in June. Through his criminal lawyer, he has not commented on the allegations either.
Okay, we're going to be very, very clear right now. No one has been charged with a crime yet.
No one has been charged yet.
Okay, no one has been charged. I believe Sanjay Madan has said something in his affidavit, and you spoke with one of his sons. What have you heard from the family so far?
The family, they have not refuted any of the accusations against them, which is significant. They have acknowledged, with the son that I spoke to at Georgia Tech, very briefly, I'll be honest with you, Raju, he sounded scared, as anyone would when allegations like this are swirling around about your parents and your brother and yourself. But he was very polite with me, and he said, look, it's not a good time. I can't talk. I can't comment, but can I call you later? And of course, he hasn't yet. I don't necessarily blame him, because if I had these kinds of allegations swirling around about me, I'm not sure I would be talking to the media either. They are aware. He's aware that this has happened, and he would be aware because in his father's affidavit, he made the point that his son's fees are very expensive at Georgia Tech, and all of their money has been seized, and they only have access to about $139,000 of all of their fortune. And that money is being held in trust for things like lawyer fees and so on. The family has concern, at least in Sanjay Madan's affidavit, he has concern that they don't have enough money for food and electricity bills and so on. When we reported that, we had a lot of people emailing us and saying, well, wait a minute, they had 6 condominiums, 2 each in each of the boys' names, as well as a 7-bedroom home, and then this other 4-bedroom home that they sold and made $1 million profit in September. So we're not really having to have a yard sale to help them, I guess. There isn't a lot of sympathy, and it is unfair to them because they haven't been charged with anything, let alone convicted of anything. But the government has made very serious allegations, hundreds of pages of documents in the statement of claim and other actions that the government has done in getting this injunction to freeze their assets. So this is a very serious situation. In another government affidavit, Mr. Madan acknowledges that there was no glitch or anything like that. And he says that it's possible some of the money went to him. And at one point he said, allegedly, that the payments were signed over him by his tenants. But the problem, if that is what he said, as the government alleges, his tenants would have to have like 10,000 children because, you can't sign over that much money. The government alleges that the story doesn't quite hold up.
This incident has already spurred some changes in how the province handles these relief funds, right? What's happened with that?
Well, this has been very embarrassing for the progressive conservative government of Premier Doug Ford because it makes it look like you're not watching the Treasury. And when your own government employees are allegedly involved, there's more questions being asked about oversight. And the opposition parties at Queen's Park have been very aggressive in saying, well, wait a minute, if this is allegedly happening, what else is happening that we don't know about? Interestingly enough, the Auditor General didn't even flag it in her report on COVID-19 response, which you would think she would have noticed $11 million allegedly missing. This has been a problem for the government. The government relaunched the program. They've changed the name of it, Raju. It's now Support for Learners. They've made some security changes and they've put some more checks and balances in terms of banking information, identification protocols, and so on. And Mr. Ford, when he announced the renewed program just a couple of weeks ago, said that they were mindful of what had happened and they were addressing it, even though he couldn't speak to the specific case because, of course, it's before the courts.
Am I wrong to think, here we go again, another government-based computer scandal? Like, maybe I'm too old. I remember the MFP, but it just seems like, do these guys need like Geek Squad just headquartered at Queen's Park?
I think the problem that governments, and I can't speak to this specific case because of course it's not resolved, but the problems that governments have had, and we've seen it with, the MFP inquiry at City Hall. We saw it with eHealth, the technology around that when the Liberals were in power at Queen's Park. Governments and technology, whether it's the Phoenix system in Ottawa, the pay system, we had the welfare computer system at Queen's Park 15, 16 years ago that was problematical. Governments seem to get themselves into trouble with technology. And I don't know why that is. It's almost as if it's so mystifying to them. I mean, we have our issues at newspapers and broadcasters with technology for sure, but we don't seem to get caught out as flat-footed as governments inevitably do, because IT projects always go over budget. There are always problems. I remember years ago writing a story on the problem with the welfare computer is that the system that the previous Tory government that Ernie Eves and Mike Harris had installed couldn't actually raise the rates, so that when the Liberals were elected in 2003, there was no function in the system to actually make it increase it. Now, I don't know how that's possible to build a computer program that can't raise it or lower a number. I mean, it seems elemental to me, but governments always get caught out. And this is not the first time that there's been a problem related to IT at Queen's Park, and it won't be the last time.
This has been fantastic for us, sir. Is there anything about this story that I didn't ask that you think that our listeners should know?
I think it's important to remember that no one has been charged with anything. Even though the police are investigating and even though the Madan family's assets have been seized, they are innocent until proven guilty, and they haven't even been charged, so it hasn't even gone to court. I worry with some of the emails that I've received from readers and the tweets that we see. You have to allow due process to go through. You cannot pass judgment. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I mean, I try to speak to them through their lawyers almost on a daily basis because I genuinely want their side of the story. That's why I'm glad I was able to speak to their son, just to say, look, we want to hear your side of things, but I'm not going to overstate it. I think they have some challenges ahead of them, legal challenges for sure, because they have not, as of yet, had any explanation for how this allegedly happened. And I think that's going to be a challenge for them in the months ahead. This is a complicated case. As I said, 7 detectives at the OPP from the anti-rackets branch working on this. That's a lot of paperwork being generated. And so the legal fees for the family will be high. It'll be more than $139,000 as they have access to now. You know, I'm sure it's not fun for them having the picture of their house on the front page of the Toronto Star, one of their 7 houses, 7 homes. But I think this story has resonated with a lot of people because so many people are hurting during the pandemic. And you know, lots of people have lost their jobs, and the Madans didn't lose their jobs until they were fired with cause. They were working throughout the pandemic, working from home, as most of us have been. There's not a lot of sympathy for them, even though I have to stress they haven't been charged or convicted of anything. So I think it's really important that we remember that. And I hope that as people are interested in this case, I hope that they always remember that. That's why our stories are full of words like alleged and allegedly, because we have to be very, very careful and to serve the public interest, not just, you know, be salacious.
And to be fair.
To be fair. There you go.
Rob, really, really, really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Raju. Take care, man.
That was Robert Benzie, the Star's Queen's Park Bureau Chief. We'll be right back. We are now joined by Peter Edwards, a reporter on the Star's Crimes, Court, and Justice team. He's here to talk about how organized crime is capitalizing on the pandemic. Peter, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thanks for having me back.
So, Peter, crime doesn't take a holiday, and as we've chatted before, we know that organized crime is looking to find ways to keep going during this pandemic. Let's start with the news. Interpol issued a warning that the organized crime may be going after the vaccine. What are the authorities trying to warn people of here?
Even if you buy something that's a legitimate vaccine, it might not have been stored correctly. Like we've heard that, you know, there's real storage issues with some of it. Could be delayed. There could just be past the expiry date. It also could just be a really good label on a very bad product. And so they're trying to get people to go to reputable sources. Don't try to get a deal on the internet because you could be endangering their life.
I think a big part of this is also potentially fake test kits as well as fake vaccines, right?
Yeah, they've been with us all the way. Like they had the faulty masks, the fake test kits, things to get you through the airport so that you can cheat the testing. They've profited all the way through on this, and they're going to profit through on the vaccine thing as well.
And it's funny, we actually wrote a great story about how historically there already have been certain vaccine heists in the past, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fairly easy one to do. And there's some of them who have family members in pharmacies, so you can find somebody. Your penalties won't be that strict. It's very, very hard to catch when you buy something off the internet. I mean, I bought something today as a Christmas gift. I don't know where it's coming from, really.
I mean, obviously, they're looking for ways to profit here. I mean, this is the thing. It's sort of along those vaccine lines. What's been happening with the drug trade, and in particular, anything local during the pandemic?
One thing with the drug trade is that we always think of cocaine as a powdered thing. It doesn't have to be powdered. It can be liquid. And when you move it liquid, you can move it in anything. Like they had some rum come into Ontario that really was liquid cocaine. And so it'd be incredibly valuable. And it looks like a $30 bottle of rum. You can have denim come in, but the denim is soaked in liquid cocaine. You can have shampoos come in. But you're just not going to test all this stuff. The trick for the criminals, though, is you have to be pretty good to do this. Like this is for the smarter criminals. And if the dumber ones are investing with the smarter ones, there's a way better chance of ripping off the dumb ones on this because they just don't know how to test. Sometimes in this stuff, you have the minor leaguers working with the major leaguers, and the major leaguers can fleece them if they feel like it.
But in terms of the drug trade, there really pretty much hasn't been very much slowdown, right?
There's been almost none. They're very good at what they do, and so they've been bringing it across. At first, drugs were like the toilet paper of the organized crime world, where people bought it up and hoarded it, and then they realized they didn't really have to because there was plenty of it coming through. There was a feeling that the prices would go skyrocket, and they just didn't.
Peter, only you would liken drugs to toilet paper. But there was also a really big marijuana bust, right?
Yeah, and there's going to be more and more of that stuff because states, when they legalize it, I mean, we're going to be shipping it down more. Some people already are shipping it down in fairly large quantities. Again, really, really tough to do. And when you have waterways, how are you going to stop that?
Major League Sports are sort of stopping and starting. Seems like there's a COVID breakdown every other day. That said, gambling is one of the other things that has continued. One of the things you wrote that I need to confirm with you, there was an uptick in chess betting. Is this true? I play chess and I saw the Queen's Gambit as well, but I find this a little surprising.
Yeah, and it was actually pre the Queen's Gambit. I thought it was a bunch of these guys getting kind of woke and sort of getting all caught up in the beauty of the TV series, which was excellent, but it wasn't that at all. They were doing it before then. This is from Declan Hill, who's an Oxford PhD who specializes in gambling, and it's a kind of an East European thing. I think around here, a lot of the guys that have trouble understanding checkers, let alone chess, but gamblers will gamble on anything. I mean, you could gamble on a turtle race if you could set it up. Like people just want to gamble. With the NFL too, the product now, when you're dipping into fifth string quarterbacks, it really, really is tough to take it that seriously. A lot of it is who's healthy, and so you might as well dip into the other stuff out there.
Now, here's the other thing. There's also been, while I assume some criminals have been, respecting the lockdown, although I'm not quite sure, there's also been some illegal betting places that have been popped up. What was this sort of palatial gambling pad in Markham that recently got busted?
Yeah, that was quite something because there's 53 rooms, just an enormous place. They found $1 million just in cash for the house there. You could buy shark fins, like braised shark fins, to eat. There was no social distancing, no masks, and it was by invitation only. So you don't want just any criminal or any gambler. You want the really high-end ones, and so there were enough of them, and then it made it hard for police because they couldn't infiltrate it. No one was inviting the police, and so they had to fly over with a helicopter and film it and then find a good time to raid it when there weren't kids around. At some point, there was kids on the ground and had to go sort of storming in, so it was a nice big sprint for them to get in, and you want to get in before they destroy all the evidence. If they see you coming, everything's gone. That was a pretty good one. They had one last Friday night where the absolute other end of the spectrum, 10 people in a old social club. And with the COVID-19 restrictions, they're able to hit them with those as well. So they're able to hit them with not respecting just all the COVID new regulations as well as the old gambling stuff. Gamblers just will gamble. I mean, it's just what they do. It's like trying to stop a fish from swimming. They'll just do it.
I do find that interesting, the fact that some of the COVID restrictions, so obviously having an illegal gathering is something that police are using. Have you heard of any other instances where police are using these sort of new restrictions and laws to catch criminals?
It's kind of odd because the criminals, these things can hurt them too. It's harder to, walk around on the street. It's harder to, how do you collect on debts if you're in a lockdown? So, it makes it tough on both sides. So the smarter ones figure a way around it, but the dumber ones fall by the wayside.
Now, that's one of those things you talk about collecting on debts. Loan sharking is another thing that you mentioned in your piece that has continued sort of, and I find this a little bit interesting because I've seen all the movies, so I know that restaurants are the type of places that get hit up for protection money. But those places are all closed. It's like trying to get blood from a stone, I think. But then the other thing is that you mentioned that the dire finances of these places probably have some of these small business guys looking for loans, which would make it a ripe opportunity, right? This is what's happening?
Yeah, it's interesting one because a lot of these guys are actually quite good in the food services business too. Like a lot of them, that's their sort of cover job. And so some of them, at first, they were suffering too. I mean, their businesses, people, you couldn't do their fine dining at their restaurant either. Now, though, what it is as we move on, it's a good chance to move in and to buy up places, to become a silent partner in a place. And so if there aren't enough loans, legitimate ones for the legitimate business owners, these other guys will come in and squeeze their way into it. There are a lot of small businesses, and when you're a big drug trafficker, a lot of your challenge is moving money. And so you do trade-based money laundering where you're over invoicing and underpaying and that sort of thing, where you make it look like a deal went through that didn't. And so anytime you can get in a legitimate business, if it's import export or buying up, champagne that never arrived or anything like that, that's a good way of moving money around. And it was interesting too, because one Italian authority said that they don't really need the collateral because the collateral is your legs. They don't need the collateral on paper as much as a bank would.
Peter, I think we talked before, and it seems the biggest opportunities here are in cybercrime and fraud, right? What's happening with that?
Yeah, cybercrime is just huge. And I mean, I just got hacked on Instagram. Retiree Rick Brennan just got hacked. I mean, it's a pretty common thing. And the guy who hacked me was trying to get money off people. Unfortunately, I don't know anyone with money to rip off. But with people working from home, and then you're probably sharing the same system as your kids, then the security won't be so good. It's pretty wide open, and the penalties aren't really that high, and it's very, very hard to catch somebody on it. And so it's more of a public awareness thing. You're not just going to catch people that easily.
Human trafficking is also still underway, but it also has a cyber bent in terms of webcam human trafficking. Can you tell us what the authorities are saying about that?
Yeah, because some of it's just cyber porn, and it gets really, really sort of numbingly sad because you have kids involved in it. And a huge amount of human trafficking is inside the country. Like you always think of it as something crossing the border, from another country, but a lot of it is just moving people around in the country. I heard of one rural place where all of a sudden this motel's doing very, very well for no real reason. But when they do make an arrest, it's one or two people, and they'll save a couple others, but it's a hard one to really bring the whole thing down. Very, very tragic. But you always think of it as people from far away being brought to Canada, and a lot of it is people being brought from unfortunate parts of Canada to other parts.
It is heartbreaking. We always love reading your stories because they always give us an inside view of some of the colorful characters that are out there. I think the last time we talked about was Pat Musitano's murder. You've mentioned in some of your stories about some very sort of small funerals for criminals and stuff like that. What type of stuff are you hearing about how these guys are gathering or not gathering, and how this pandemic has disrupted, I guess, their social life and how they observe traditions and rituals and stuff like funerals?
It makes paranoid people more paranoid because you always wonder who's listening in on you. The rest of us worry about it, and so they definitely do. A long, long time ago, I heard, don't worry about your enemies, it's your friends that'll do you in. And that's really what they have to worry about. Almost always when you write about a murder, there was a meeting of three people, and the guy who got killed trusted the guy who brought him to the meeting, and somehow that guy got away unscathed, and that carries on. I mean, even Pat Musitano, he met in a parking lot with someone he trusted, and another person, the person he trusted, got away just fine, and Pat was shot to death. So I mean, it's an old pattern, and so the paranoia lives on. Some of these guys aren't geniuses on the internet either, and so the signing on is a difficult thing. One guy got caught in Niagara region because he couldn't remember his passwords, and so he left them on a yellow sticky note on his computer screen. And so police snuck in, took a look at that, copied it, monitored his stuff for a couple months, and then came in and arrested him. I mean, it's fantastic stuff to read. I've read it, and it's fantastic, all these little emails or texts when they think they're not being watched, but it's all because some Luddite couldn't remember his password, which I can totally relate
to. So can I, Peter. And then with that message, use a password manager. Anyways, Peter, this is fantastic for us. Honestly, I know we're talking about sordid crimes, but I do love having you on because of your attitude toward these things. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you think that our listeners should know?
One thing is, this is real extreme capitalism. I mean, a long, long time ago, an excellent organized crime reporter, Michel Auger from Montreal, he told me that he was a beekeeper on the side because that just calmed him down and made him feel better. And he said, bees are perfect socialism and organized crime is extreme capitalism. And so they're always looking for the next thing. They're always innovating. They're always being nimble. And it's sort of morality aside and, what works. And so with COVID, we're seeing that again. And I think we'll see the strong will get stronger and the weak will end up by the wayside even quicker than they would have.
Well, Peter, I'm sure we're going to have you on again in the future. I want to thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I enjoyed that. Thanks.
Peter Edwards is a reporter on the Star's crime, courts, and justice team. That's it for today. Thanks so much for joining us. This Matters is hosted and produced by me, Rajin Budler, Adrian Chung, and Saba Etisaz. Produced and mixed by Sean Pattenden, and our director of programming is JP Foso. Our show theme music is by So Called, and our episode music is by Mike DeAngelis. We want to hear what stories matter to you. Please send us comments, questions, or ideas to thismatters@thestar.ca. Please consider supporting the journalism the Toronto Star newsroom does at thestar.com. And don't forget to subscribe to This Matters on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Let's talk soon.